This is the Sri Ramana Maharshi Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm not a teacher or a guru, just someone who loves this teaching and wants to share with like-minded people. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book Talks with Ramana Maharshi, and this week is Talk 65. Let me get it up so we can talk about it. A visitor asks, is the Jagat, the world, perceived even after self-realization? Maharshi asks, for whom is this question? Or excuse me, from whom is this question? Is it from a Jnani, one who knows the self, or a Jnani, one who does not know? And the questioner says, from an Jnani. Maharshi says, realize to whom the question arises. It can be answered if it arises after knowing the doubter. Can the Jagat or the body say that it is? Or does the seer say that the Jagat or the body is? The seer must be there to see the objects. Find out the seer first. Why worry yourself now with what will be in the hereafter? Sri Bhagavan continued, what does it matter if the Jagat is perceived or not perceived? Have you lost anything by your perception of Jagat now? Or do you gain anything when there is no such perception in your deep sleep? It is immaterial whether the world is perceived or not perceived. The Jnani sees the Jnani active and is confounded. The Jagat is perceived by both, but their outlooks differ. Take the instance of the cinema. There are pictures moving on the screen. Go and hold them. What do you hold? It's only the screen. Let the pictures disappear. What remains over? The screen again. So also here. Even when the world appears, see to whom it appears. Hold the substratum of the eye. After the substratum is held, what does it matter if the world appears or disappears? The Jnani takes the world to be real, whereas the Jnani sees it only as the manifestation of the self. Now, my comments. The initial dialogue sets out the discussion. To repeat, a visitor says, is the world perceived even after self-realization? And Ramana replies, from whom is this question? Is it from a Jnani or from an ayani? The visitor says, from an ayani. Maharshi says, realize to whom the question arises. It can be answered if it arises after knowing the doubter. Can the Jagat or the world say that it is? The questioner asks about the world. Many are confused about the teaching that the world is unreal, like a dream. This seems to go against their common experience. They perceive an external world in which their life plays out, that surrounds them and in which they act to find happiness. How can it be not real? It's the only reality they know. Ramana immediately asks about the stand taken, the identity held when asking the question. Are you asking as a yani, one who knows the self, or as an ayani, one who does not know the self? The view of the world depends on the view of oneself. After the questioner replies that he is asking as an ayani, Ramana replies that the answer to the question can only be found when you know what is true and real about yourself. The world and the body rise as seemingly separate things only after you take on identity as an individual. As an individual, you know yourself and the world with your mind, and you know them as separate objects. Your perspective limits what you can see. To respond to the question, first you need to clear up the context in which the question is posed. So Ramana asks basically, find out who is asking. Ramana continues, or does the seer say that the world or the body is? The seer must be there to see the objects. Find the seer first. Why worry yourself now with what will be in the hereafter? The objects, the separate world and body, only appear after we declare ourselves to be a separate subject. Investigate this idea, the idea of a separate subject and object. You will discover that both only appear in consciousness. So, are they any different from the consciousness itself? Is the ring anything other than the gold from which it is formed? You are only going to see this when you see yourself as this consciousness, as the self. Since this is so, why concern yourself about it now? Rather, direct your wondering, your investigation towards knowing the truth about yourself. Ramana continues with a deep perspective. What does it matter if the world is perceived or not perceived? Have you lost anything by your perception of the world now? Or do you gain anything when there is no perception in your deep sleep? It is immaterial whether the world is perceived or not perceived. Ramana asks, Really, what is the difference? Do you, the self, gain anything when you see the world? Does it become more? Do you increase the level of your awareness? Do you get more consciousness, more existence from the world? Or do you just find the world within your consciousness? Does consciousness gain anything when apparently full of objects? Likewise, does consciousness diminish in sleep or in meditation when there are no objects? This is hard to answer for many people since they equate consciousness with the mind, and the mind becomes dormant in sleep. So, based on remembering no mental experiences during sleep, they might feel like they weren't really there, that they somehow went out of existence during sleep. Ramana reminds us that we know we slept well, and to know this, then consciousness must be there. Otherwise, we wouldn't know. In sleep, mental activity ceases and the world seems to fade away. But consciousness is always active. Consciousness is always conscious. Consciousness is not diminished or reduced even when mental activity increases, decreases, or even stops. So, what is the difference? Only with the presence or absence of objects of the mind. Does this make consciousness gain or lose anything? What is your experience? Ramana continues, the ayani sees the yani active and is confounded. The world is perceived by both, but their outlooks differ. Take the instance of the cinema. There are pictures moving on the screen. Go and hold them. What do you hold? It's only the screen. Let the pictures disappear. What remains? The screen again. So also here, the unrealized see the realized and are confused. Both seem to be active in the world. They are active, though, within fundamentally different contexts. The unrealized sees themselves as a separate individual in a separate world. The realized know that there is only consciousness, and what seems like the individual person and the world are both only appearing in consciousness. They are consciousness appearing as separate things, but they're not really separate at all. Appearances, like the gold ring is an appearance of gold. The ring is only gold. Ramana continues, even when the world appears, see to whom it appears. Hold the substratum of the I. After that substratum is held, what does it matter if the world appears or disappears? Investigate this consciousness, even when you seem to see the world and individuals. Then notice that everything you perceive, the world and the individual, appear within this being and consciousness that are inseparable and at the base of everything. Anything you perceive or think about exists, even if only a mental object, and these are all known. Consciousness is the only knower. This being and consciousness is then the substrate of everything, at the base of everything. Inquiry is first noticing this substrate, this self, and then staying with this substrate instead of getting fascinated with all the objects that come and go within the substrate. Nome says, considered in relation to all else, the self is the one substratum. So Ramana tells us to stay with the self. This is self-abidance. To one standing here as the self, what does it matter if something or everything appears or disappears? Things come and go, and who you are is changeless, never comes or goes. So abide as the self. Then what does the world even matter? Ramana says, hold the substratum. He is saying, hold to the self. My teacher Nome says, holding refers to non-objective knowledge. This is deeper than any mental knowledge. This holding is not a thought, not even your very best thought. Non-objective knowledge comes from the self. The only way you can know this is to be the self. This is the entire aim of the practice. Ramana sums it up. The Ayani takes the world to be real, whereas the Yani sees it only as a manifestation of the self. The unrealized see themselves as separate beings acting within a separate external world. From this view, they immerse themselves with the joys and sorrows of everyday life and never find peace of mind that endures. The realized know that there is only the self. The self is all, and they are the self. How can they be any different from that which is all? So, if there is a world, then it is within the self, within yourself. If there is no world, then it is within the self, within yourself. There is no difference between you and the world, and no difference between you and no world. So inquire, know the self. And now we will listen to a talk from Nome, Abide as the Self. Excuse me, I didn't set it up correctly.
Utterly undifferentiated. This existence is illimitable. If the self is realized as such, that which knows and that which is known are one and the same thing. Existence knows itself with sense transcendent, mind transcendent knowledge. If the self is not known, that which does not know actually does not exist. The self cannot harbor any ignorance regarding itself, being of the nature of knowledge or consciousness itself. Another, the non-self, how could that ever know the self? And as the self is existence, the non-knower would be non-existent. Sri Bhagavan, Ribhu, and others exhort those who would be wise to abide as the self. What does it mean? Certainly there are not two selves that one would abide as or realize the other. The self is only one. It implies an absence of misidentification, which alone constitutes ignorance. Ignorance in turn alone constitutes bondage and is the root cause of all suffering. To be free of such, abide as the self. What does it mean? It means knowledge, bereft of ignorance, devoid of misidentification. It is a matter of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, not mere sensations and not mere thinking, but knowledge. For this knowledge, inquire within yourself to know the nature of your existence, the nature of the innermost consciousness. Abandoning any tendency to misidentify with the body, which is most certainly not the self. Inquire as to the true significance of I. That which you truly are, what is your very existence, is always. So inquire to find that which ever exists within you. It cannot be anything objective, subtle or gross, thought or sensation. For these are all perceived to come and go. Moreover, they are unreal. Their coming and going and their transience is not the definition of their unreality, but it is indicative of it. What are you? What are you always? Your existence is unchanged. by the states, activities, and conditions and such of the body. What is this existence? Your existence remains unchanged through the passage of various states and conditions of the mind, such as waking, dreaming, and deep dreamless sleep. What is that existence? To clearly identify yourself as the existence alone and not the content of the mind and its states, and not the body and the content of the sensations with their attributes, is the dawning of knowledge, true knowledge, self-knowledge. For such knowledge, inquire, who am I? The nature of the inquirer alone is the answer. Know yourself. That is the infinite and eternal existence. That is Brahman. That is the self. The only self there actually is. So then, if you know yourself, the absolute reality comprehends itself. If you suppose that you do not know the self, who is it that does not know? Like this, making your vision non-objective, inquire to know who you are.
Now we'll take a little time to inquire, to experience what Ramana and Nome talked about. Get comfortable in your seat, quiet yourself, and take a long breath in. Feel your breathing. Long exhale. And notice that you exist, and you know that you exist. You know this from deep within, not from your senses or your mind. Now inquire, investigate within yourself. Are you in the body, or is the body within you? Are you in the world, or is the world within you? You know the body, who is the knower. You know the world, who is the knower. What just comes and goes? What within you is always. Who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right. Now for a short chant. Om
Shanti.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Peace, peace, peace. All right. Questions, comments?
So peaceful. Have a peaceful birthday.
Yes, well, thank you. We will. And, I think before the adventure movie, having this time to just notice and remember who we really are is good. And hopefully, from Ramana's teachings while we're at the movie, we'll remember that we are the screen and not all the drama on the movie.
Right. And enjoy it.
Okay, we will. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste.